What is literacy in 2021? This is a conversation I've been having for a really long time, and just thinking about what do kids need? What do we need as a society to understand? And you think about how literacy has evolved over time. At one time in our history, we're using hieroglyphics. And now you think about video, podcasts, the ability to watch this, the ability to create this. Is this a literacy in our world today? I had an awesome conversation with Clement Townsend just talking about this, and he has a really interesting background in journalism. He does a lot of sports. He did a lot of sports journalism, and now he's working with schools around the world, in the United States as well, to actually help teachers teach this to their students, and not just figure out how to do this as an extra thing, but how to actually combine this in our classrooms, in our middle school classrooms, in our English classrooms, in our math classes, whatever. And I think it really gives a lot of great skills to our students that whether they go into this or pursue this field in the next phase of their lives, and he makes this really great point, it teaches us all these transferable skills. One of the things I know about this podcast is that it's taught me to listen a lot better and really try to understand and try to think of questions as I'm listening to my guests. And that's a skill that all of us could develop, especially myself, in our work that we do, no matter what field it is. This is a great conversation. I know you're going to love it. A lot of great points, a lot of great ideas. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset Podcast. Hey everyone, this is George Couros, another episode of the Innovator's Mindset Podcast. And I'm really pumped. I was just having an awesome conversation with Clement Townsend. I hope I practiced your name before saying it as good as you. But I'm really excited to kind of talk to you, share some ideas. And we had connected talking about some of the stuff that you're doing with like media and video and some of your background with, your parents as educators, and the ideas that you talk about are really something that I think really kind of embodies the notions of innovator's mindset, innovate inside the box. So for the people who are, listening to you, maybe exposed to you for the first time, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the context of education?
So I work with schools and help teachers integrate media into the classroom. I guess I took an unconventional route into education. You mentioned it though. Both of my parents were educators, so I guess it was kind of inside of me all along. My mom was a teacher and my dad was an administrator. I personally, and George, I think you'll feel this one, I personally wanted to be an NBA player. That's what I wanted to do.
I do feel that.
Absolutely, right?
I
right?
do
That's
feel
you
that.
as well.
I do.
Right. But unfortunately, I didn't get the height. I'm only like 5'7", 5'8", so I understood early on that wasn't going to be the ticket for me. But since my parents were educators, they said, son, you have to have a plan. What are you going to do? And when your parents are educators, when I grew up, the next step was to go to college. So I just immediately thought, well, if I can't play sports, the next best thing will be to talk about sports. I see guys at the games, in the locker room. I know they get paid a nice amount of money in the media. So I decided I would be on television and try to talk about sports. Didn't know how to do it, but I figured out the next step was going to college, major in communications. What's so funny? Let me know, George.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Like I'll tell you, if you'd asked me to this day, would you be the Lakers ball boy? I'm taking that job. Just to be around it, right? I love it. I love it.
So how could I take what I enjoy at sports, even though I couldn't play, but still be around it? So majored in communications, figured out what school is great in that. That happened to be Temple University in Philadelphia. That prepared me real well. And as soon as I graduated, I was on television in San Angelo, Texas. So for your viewers, your audience that's in the United States, I'm from Chicago, big city. Philadelphia, big city. San Angelo, Texas is a small city in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was culture shock. It was such a big change. But I think some people would understand in different professions, you have to work your way up. You don't just start in a big city. You have to go to a small place, cut your teeth and things of that nature. Thought I would be in San Angelo 1 year. I was in San Angelo 5 years, a test of perseverance. After San Angelo, Texas, went on to Mobile, Alabama. I was in Mobile, Alabama for close to 8 years, but that's where I did some cool things. Went to the college football national championship. They have Alabama and Auburn there. Those are like professional teams in the state of Alabama. You know, went to the NBA All-Star game, went to the NCAA tournament, and all these cool things in Mobile, Alabama. And along the way, I always met a lot of youth, a lot of young people who are interested in media. And they said, I want to do what you're doing. How can I be on television? And that stuck with me. So one thing, as I back up a little bit, I always wanted my parents to see me on television in Chicago. That was the dream. So we talked about it a little bit before. Maybe in Canada, if you're a sports fan and you're on television, you want to be on TSN. In the United States, if you're on television and you do sports, you want to be on ESPN. But I didn't want to be on ESPN. I just wanted my parents to see me on television in Chicago. Went on to Lynchburg, Virginia after Mobile, was there for a year. And then finally, after 14 years total, San Angelo, Mobile, and Lynchburg, I got a call to Chicago. They wanted me to be on television at a network in Chicago. But unfortunately, a couple of months before I got that call, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And George, you know what it's like to lose a parent because I know that you've lost your dad before. So I got the job in Chicago. The same week that I started, my mom passed away from pancreatic cancer. So, you know, what I had been working for over those 14 years for my parents to see me on television, my mom never got a chance to see that. That was difficult circumstances. My dad did get a chance to see it, so I continued to move forward. 3 years in Chicago, 17 years in the business, I got laid off. It was cutbacks. It happens in a lot of industries. So for the first time in 17 years, I was at a crossroads. I had been on television my whole life. But I remember there were so many young people that wanted to know what I was doing. And with my parents being educators, I noticed there was a gap in terms of students in school were not learning media. They weren't learning how to create videos. Some of the things that I learned as a journalist, now students can learn in the classroom because technology is what it is. When you and I were in school, you couldn't really edit like that because the equipment wasn't available. And even if you did edit, where would you post it? Because there was no internet. But now that the barriers have been broken down and students have recording devices and you have apps on your phone and you can post things, I just saw a natural merging of education and media, and that led me to being an educational media consultant and really trying to make sure that youth learn media creation in the classroom to prepare them for the society they're entering into.
So when I was in high school, and I was born in 1975, I was in high school, and it's interesting that you share that about how hard this was. So this is probably, you know, late 80s. And like you said, I'm super into basketball. We were tasked to make a commercial, you know, on anything that we wanted. And I did a dunking commercial. Like, we did a commercial for basketball shoes, right? And it was like the time of D Brown with the Reebok pump. And we were playing, exactly, I got the power, you know that song, right? And so like that was like Absolutely. The music, right? And you didn't have to worry about copyright because they said nobody's gonna see it, right? So I wasn't worried Snap was gonna actually like sue us or anything like that because they would never know. And so there was like this video, we like cut off the bottom so you can't see me jumping off a springboard to dunk, right? Like, and it's just amazing. So that video, when you said about this editing, to record that video, we had like a big, you know, VHS camera and things like that. That took us like 5 days of editing because you had double VCRs and all this other stuff, right? And now that same video, I could easily do on my phone I could record it, edit it, add music, probably 25, 30 minutes, right? And you like just kind of seeing that. And I think that's kind of one of the things that you're talking about is that there's just access to this stuff now.
And where did you distribute that video? Once it was done, you know, it was on VHS tape. So who saw it and how did they see it?
Yeah, nobody. Nobody saw it. We watched it over and over again. I wish that, I know there's services now that you can take like all of your VHS stuff or whatever and like post it somewhere, which probably I don't think would be a good idea for like many people my age. But like you think about that was, you know, that was like a dream of mine to be able to do a lot of the things that you're doing because, you know, I wanted to be just like you. like MBA, but I'm like, but I'm not making MBA. So I want to do that. But like, even just, we didn't even know colleges, right? Like we didn't even know programs because we were so limited in information. And that it just like, I grew up in a very small town. And so I love that, you know, that you're kind of exposing this. And so like when you're looking at, you talk about some of the programs that we talked before, I think even the access that you give people is really unique, right? Because it's not like, hey, there's only one way to get this, right? You talked about like there's different ways that you can access, you know, the programs that you're working with.
Absolutely. So, I mean, certainly, if you want to talk about editing, I grew up or I learned on a professional platform in terms of like an Adobe Premiere, but that might scare a lot of people,
Right.
because Adobe Premiere is super professional. Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro. But even now, though, they have something, We Video, which is just amazing for remote learning. And a lot of schools have Chromebooks and things of that nature. So really helping teachers get over that hurdle of, wow, this is out of my comfort zone. You know, I didn't go to school for this sort of thing, but understanding the importance of it and students needing to learn it, whether it's for speaking skills, whether it's for writing skills, or whether it's just for actual editing purposes, because certainly if you know how to edit, that can lend itself to so many open doors. You and I were talking before, this podcast has some amazing editing to it. I mean, so to be able to have a fifth grader learn
Right.
editing just in terms of their confidence and creativity. Look, I took an idea and I created something tangible, a video. And now if I want to, I can go and create something else, or I can get a job in editing. As you mentioned, the exposure and how it expands the minds of a young person, fifth grade, seventh. I didn't learn this stuff until college. So I just truly believe the importance, how so many young people can be ahead of, I guess, maybe our generation by, you know, administrators and teachers exposing students to this sort of thing at a young age.
Well, so one of the questions I have for you is that somebody could be listening to this and say, okay, this is great, but kids figure this out on their own. So why do we even need to teach this in school, right? Like you're seeing, I don't know how much you're on TikTok or anything like that, but someone like Charlie D'Amelio, who's making, you know, videos in the school bathroom at like 15 years old, and like a year later has over 100 million followers on TikTok, right? Doing videos and things like this. And so what do you say to that kind of like, well, you know, kids are doing this anyway. So like, why do we need to teach this? Why would schools need to actually have a focus on this?
Most students or young people that do this anyway don't understand the power of media for good. And with me having a journalism background, what I primarily teach is video stories. And these are stories that inform, that inspire, and impact. George, I know we're just on the same page, because I know one of your things is preparing students for the world and helping students change the world.
Yep.
It's so many Charlie D'Amelios and prank videos and dance videos and TikToks, but where are the positive, informational, inspirational videos? It's unrealistic to expect a student to take media and really start to create informational videos or inspirational videos without somebody showing them. So why do schools need to do this? Because it's now giving students a different perspective on what they can do with the media. We hear so much about fake media, but what about, where are the students, where are the middle schoolers or the high schoolers that are pushing out, creating, and distributing positive messages?
Right.
If schools don't train students to do this, students won't just do this on their own. They'll do what they see their peers doing. And I understand it's a time and place for everything. There's a place for fun and prank videos, but still, one of the things I really try to emphasize is media is not just entertainment, it's also educational. And that's where the school comes in.
So how have we not met before? Like your message is so it's amazing. So actually, like, so I think it was in 2012 or 2013. I know you're going to appreciate this. I talked about how education was really talking about digital citizenship, right? So digital citizenship, you know, how kids interact online, keeping our stuff safe. And then most of the times when schools, people would come in and maybe kind of doing some of the work that you're doing, but not to the extent that you're doing it, they would talk about don't cyberbully, don't be a horrible person. I'm like, we're setting the bar so low for our kids. Like we're saying, as long as you are not horrible, we're happy, right? So I try to actually flip that, and so I actually I came up with I defined a term called digital leadership. Like, how do we actually use social media, especially, but technology, to make a positive impact on the lives of others? And one of the things that you talk about that I think is really important is that idea of when you have students doing this learning from peers. And if any of you have read the book Lord of the Flies, that's what I actually often compare the internet to, is that we're going to throw a bunch of kids on an island, and that's the internet, and just hope for the best, right? And then I think about, when was I the worst human being ever? At 13 years old. And then I also think, what is the terms of service for most social media? 13 years old. So you give me Twitter when I'm 13 and just say, have at it. I can't even imagine what stuff that I would have done that actually would have negatively impacted me probably for the rest of my life, right? And so that contention of like, talking about this. So when you're talking about your program and you're talking about this, like, is there like a certain age that you start with students? Is there like, something that you when you work with schools, do they have like a certain age in mind? Like, when do you start actually see this as being a beneficial time to do this?
So for me, I started middle school. Again, I'm in the United States, so that's about 5th grade.
Yeah.
That's the age group that I've seen that is really able to grasp the information. Because now what I really focus on is video stories. So video stories is, or some people might call it digital storytelling. So if people wondering what that is just taking a topic, that a student is interested in, something that might be going on in their neighborhood. You mentioned cyberbullying. I mean, that's huge, nationwide or across the world. And I've had students who wanted to do a story on cyberbullying. How do you take that topic? How do you research that topic? How do you now, hopefully, because I'm a journalist, hopefully you do an interview. That has been a little bit more difficult in a COVID environment, but how would you do questions? And again, that has to do with interpersonal skills and listening and things of the nature. How do you write it? And that gets back to the writing skills. How do you narrate it? But I said all that to say, when we're really trying to enhance those skills, 5th grade is about that age group where I've really seen them be able to grasp it. If you get a little lower, they don't take it as serious. Their skill set might not necessarily be up to par. Certainly you can find 3rd graders and 4th graders, who are grade level above, but just in my working with students for the last couple of years, starting right there at 5th grade, maybe around 12 years old, seems to be that age where they're really moldable and they can really learn and grow. And a lot of those students really start to take initiative too. When you get into the high school group, certainly I won't say all of them feel like they know it all, but it can be a little more difficult to reach them. But I've seen some amazing things with high schoolers as well, but I've also seen some great initiative with these 5th and 6th graders where I give them something and then come back a week later and they've just done above and beyond. Right. I just showed them one thing and they've done 3 and 4 things. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, so it was interesting your pause there, because so this is just how you did that, because one of the things that I've talked about is like how we as a K-12 community actually focus on this, right? So when I work with elementary teachers, they'll often say kids are too young, right? Then I work with middle school teachers and then they'll say these kids are too weird, right? Like they're not ready for this stuff, right? And then this is where you pause, and I'll say high school, and a lot of teachers say no, it's too late. Like it's actually you're at the point, and I appreciate you saying starting with these kids in middle school, because if you start at the high school, you're not teaching, you have to unteach, because they already have habits. And it's like, okay, what do you know? Like, what do you know, Canadian guy, about the internet kind of thing, right? And I actually think a lot of students listen to me because they see like I actually have a podcast, I do YouTube, I got like Twitter and all this other stuff. Whereas I think a lot of times their advice comes from maybe people who haven't done this, right? And I think a lot of times in schools, a lot of the policies, a lot of teachers reach out to me about this, say like, I want to try this, but our administrators won't let us do this. Our superintendent won't let us do this. And usually when that's happening, I honestly think it's because of a lack of information, not an abundance, right? Like they don't know. So they see something on the news, they see something on the media that happened negatively. And they're like, no, we're not putting our kids there. And for me, when they say that, it's more of it's more of a, this is not our problem, right? Like, this is not our problem. They'll figure it out. And I actually believe if you have a kid who's a valedictorian, does all the academic things, right? And then says something horrible on social media, and then it doesn't matter anymore. It's like, yeah, all the things. And like, honestly, I'm sure, like, I don't know if I feel blessed that a lot of this stuff didn't exist when I was a kid, because I probably, you know, both of us probably wouldn't be, you know, in jobs. I'm curious, you know, as a journalist who is, you know, having years of your stuff put out there, have you got any, like, I'm sure you've got negative stuff towards you on social media. How have you dealt with that? Like, I'd be really curious on, because, you know, like, you know, I get some negative stuff my way in education, right? Journalists, you know, I've seen it's pretty bad in some cases. So, like, have you got that before? And if you have, like, how do you deal with it? And like, what advice would you give with students dealing with the same thing?
So early on, as a journalist, you learn that you have to have thick skin, because being on television every single night, you're going into people's homes and things of that nature, and everybody won't like what you say, how you say it. You could say a name wrong. As much as we try to do our research and information, we could actually get something wrong. Or sometimes I did sports, so I would have some fun. I would try to, you know, make it a time where people could loosen up a little bit, because if you watch the news, it could be a lot of death and violence and things of nature. And I might try to crack a joke and people think my joke is not funny. So you have to have thick skin. Like, you have to understand that criticism comes along with the territory. And I think, you know, putting this in the context of students, just in life, you have to have thick skin. You know, you have to be able to take constructive criticism. So, you know, teaching students video creation and having them distribute and put things out there that might be criticized is actually, for me, in my opinion, a good lesson for students to learn how to have thick skin and understand you can't please everybody. I was doing a session maybe several months ago, and a young person told me they were afraid to put some things on YouTube because they were fearful of what the backlash might be and, you know, what their friends might say. And, you know, I just told them that the same thing I'm saying now. You have to develop thick skin. You know, certainly don't let that hold you back, and don't let the, you know, kind of what we would say, the haters or the negative feedback destroy your confidence. That one person doesn't determine the value of what you have brought to the table. What you create and what you showcase and what you distribute isn't diminished by the negative criticism of one person. I think that leads to a broader conversation of, I guess the society in which we live, whereby so many people are beholden to likes and hearts and things of that nature. And again, I tell my daughter, your life is not just about likes. You know, what you put out there, if it gets 5 likes or 5,000 likes, it's still something that you created. It's still great. And you still have a high level of self-confidence. So to get back to your first question of how did I deal with it, I understood who I was. And I understood there are always going to be people who criticize you, but my self-worth wouldn't be diminished by the negative comments of a minority.
Well, and this is, so when I work with, I think especially parents with this stuff, and someone will say, you know, I'm really nervous about my kid putting stuff out there, and, you know, what could happen and things like that. And I say, well, first of all, like, would you rather your kid screw up on social media when they're 8 or when they're 15? Because the 8 probably isn't going to be life ending, but 15 could be bad, right? Like, if they're going to make that mistake, and I would guide them through this. But I share this and I said, I don't know if this is going to make things worse, but I need you to understand it, that let's say your kid puts something on YouTube and they want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And let's just say it sucks. Let's say it's terrible, right? They are going to get a lot of hate thrown their way, right? And they're going to get, you know, just people doing rude comments, things like this too. Okay, so let's flip it the opposite way. Let's say they put out something that's incredible, amazing. They're going to get a lot of hate still, just from different people, right? That people are just, people are upset because You know, they're like, let's be honest, a lot of people criticize people on social media that are like totally jealous. And, you know, like there's this one, like you're from Chicago. They had I can't remember the kicker's name, right? The guy who dinged it off the field goal post, right? And all these people like
double ding. That was against the Eagles, and certainly his name is on the tip of my tongue.
I can't right. And so all these people on social media are like, I could have made that field goal. And so I can't remember if it was on ESPN or something like that. They actually got a bunch of the people that said on social media, can you make the field goal? And not one of them did it. And they were all terrible, right? And it's like a lot of people that criticize who don't do, right? And so I really love the message of, you know, that you talk about your daughter, like you got to know who you are. But you also said something, and I'm sure you meant it very purposely, is that you said constructive criticism, because there's a lot of criticism that's not of any benefit at all. And to be honest with you, I can tell, I have a pretty good indicator, like this person is not trying to help me. They're trying to give me criticism to tear me down, to elevate themselves. They're not actually doing this in a way to kind of, you know, connect and share. And so like when you think about all of this stuff, because I know you do a lot of work with educators, right? So, and you and I were talking before, I'm already doing, my daughter Clea, she's 4.5. She's like big into like YouTube unboxing videos. We started doing some, you know, unboxing videos. I like to say she's into basketball shoes, but I'm into basketball shoes, which makes her by default into it. She's kind of interested in that. So for any parents listening there, like what are some things that you would suggest? Because I know a lot of them are like, because like my point to them is like, no matter what, they're going to actually, they're going to face, you know, negative stuff. They're going to face it, but you can't shelter them forever. And I don't want them dealing with this for the first time when they're on their own. I want it when I can actually provide support, be there. So when you're talking, you know, thinking about parents doing this, like what advice would you give to a parent who's maybe listening to this and not, because I have a lot of people that listen to this that are educators, but then they start, you know, going to their parent role, thinking about their own children. Like what's some advice that you would do, like maybe things they could try, you know, with their own children?
So number one, certainly when it comes to like a YouTube, if you want to go that route, you can turn comments off. So they won't even face the feedback. People cannot even leave negative comments. So to me, that's the easiest thing. You know, have your child upload a video and turn comments off. And that way, you know, they now have started to create. You know, for me, you know, it's about though meeting youth where they are. And I'm sure you know this, and a parent knows this, educators know this. Students are watching videos every single day. So when it comes to making learning relevant, I'm sure there are, you know, excuses about, you know, I personally as an administrator, I'm not tech savvy, or I don't want my child to face criticism and negative feedback, and I want to be sure that they are safe. But we have to make things relevant for what children are doing. You know, children or students aren't watching TV the way that we used to watch TV. It can be YouTube, you mentioned TikTok, it can be Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. So meshing or, you know, correlating the learning to where they are. And now again, not just seeing media. And when I say media, for me, media is videos. That's creating videos and that's telling stories, you know, just understanding that it's important to, you know, teach them about this sort of thing. And with anything, there are going to be some drawbacks. With anything, there are going to be some cons, but really realizing what I'm sure you try to emphasize to your audience, the positives and the pros so far outweigh the cons is just something in this society where people are only going to watch more and more video. Like people are not going to start watching less video. They're going to watch more video. I say this all the time. If you have an Apple Watch, I'm pretty sure at some point we're going to be watching video on our watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's just only a
Right.
matter of time.
Right.
So why wouldn't you start to have your child creating? And I know you said this and published it in terms of school versus learning.
Yeah.
Like students just have to be taught to create. You can't just be a spectator in life. You have to be a participator. And that comes with just creating things. Whatever it is, just starting to create. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this. I'm sure you're as passionate about it as I am.
Yeah,
but it's just so necessary. And it's so necessary in the classroom, in school. So it's not just worksheets, or I'm not just doing a term paper. I can actually show demonstration and mastery and understanding of concepts in a visual medium as well now, because most people have a phone.
Well, so I'm listening to you and think about probably when we both kind of grew up. You know, like I think about like kids don't even have to watch commercials now, right? Like that's a crazy thing to me. But then I'm watching like a Raptors game and my daughter has no interest in the Raptors game. But when the commercials come on, that's because it's like storytelling, right? Like it's interesting. It's actually interesting to her. Whereas like that would be the worst part of it for me as a child. And I think that when we were kind of talking about this a little bit before, about when we were talking about what the basics are in education. I've written about this several times, is that when you look at literacy is a constant evolution, right? And so you have schools who are like, we must teach cursive. Cursive is like so fundamental, so necessary. And I don't want to say don't teach cursive, because if I say that, I'm going to get so much hate. And I'm not saying, I actually really believe kids need to be able to read cursive. I think that's actually a real important skill, because we'll lose a lot of, our history of, culture, things like that, if we can't actually, read and decipher things from the past. But when you look at like video creation, and there is like, I can't even remember this, and I'm sure you'd actually, whether we know the exact number, it was like 95% of people online consume information, only 5% create. It's just such a small number. And then you think about it in school, that a lot of it is that when a lot of times we think about the default is like, I don't want kids on YouTube all day. And it's like, there's a difference between them watching video and actually creating video, because it's not just sitting in front of it's not just sitting in front of a screen and editing and things like that. It's the planning. It's the conversations you have in groups when you're talking about, like, even when we were doing that dumb video when I was a kid doing the basketball video, like, yeah, we had to spend 3 days on the editing, but we planned out stuff and we did some like artistry, things like that. And I'm curious about this too, because I think that some people hearing this might think, okay, this is great for the students who want to maybe go into a career similar to yours. But I actually think it's beneficial to every student, because like one of the things that I've talked about forever, if every kid is getting Googled and we're constantly telling them, hey, don't do this stuff because if anyone finds anything negative of you, you're going to lose opportunity. Where I'm saying, well, if everyone's Googling you and they find incredible stuff, then you're going to actually be in an advantage. So like how does what you're talking about actually benefit a student who's not necessarily going on to become a journalist, or maybe do this as their main, wants to do a career that doesn't necessarily have, and I don't want to say this as a focal point, but the main focal point, because like businesses know that if you want to, I don't know if you remember, if you ever saw the Dollar Shave Club, the Dollar Shave
Club for men, for sure.
Do you remember like there was like the first commercial that went viral, and it was so ridiculous that it actually basically started this business, but it was the business was around a razor, but it was the video that got people like all of a sudden signing up to it. So I think that when you're looking at there's different elements of this too, but this is what you're talking about is not just for the students who want to solely go into video creation, correct? Like
absolutely.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with a student wanting to be a journalist like I was, or be in the media profession. It has everything to do with transferable skills. We teach science. And to your point, I'm not against science, but every child would not be a scientist, but it's about what they learn through going through the scientific process. We have sports. Certainly you and I would have liked to be a professional athlete, and so many parents put their child in sports. A lot of them might feel like their child will be a professional athlete, but it's about the teamwork and it's about the work ethic. We have, music and Spanish, but every child isn't going to be a pianist. It's about the transferable skills that they learn through the video creation process. That's what I really hope that educators and specifically administrators take away from this. It's about the reading, because you have to do research and read information and the research. It's about the writing, as you mentioned, whether it's just a skit or a video story. Before you do anything, you have to write it out. It's about the presenting. So many times when I work with young people, because I have a journalist background, I emphasize narration and voiceover. So, what is your pacing like? What is your tone like? What is your projection? We need these communication skills, because there are still adults who have a fear of public speaking. Yes, there is technology in terms of editing and things of that nature, but it's not just about being a media professional or being a journalist. It's skills that they can use in anything. If you want to open up your own restaurant, it will be good to know how to write videos to showcase the food choices that you have. If you want to open up a hair salon, it will be good to show the different hairstyles that you can do through video, and can write that and can film that and present that. If you want to be a real estate agent and you want to showcase homes, every single profession, a car dealership, if you're in finance and business, like every profession, you're going to need to know how to create videos and need to know how to write. And going back to the example of presenting, again, if you're going to apply for a job and have an interview, you need to know how to present yourself and need to know how to speak. So this really has nothing to do with being a journalist, as I was, of being a media professional. Is now taking technology, putting it in the classroom, and changing the way that we teach students basic skills that is now more relevant and relatable to today's society, but it also has benefits that they can utilize in their everyday life. I hope that comes across.
That was amazing, because that to me was like your analogy of like all the other elements of things that we teach, right? Like the scientific method doesn't only apply to science, right? But it applies to so many different facets of our lives. And I think that to me and I think these are conversations that I think more and more communities have to have. Like I just, like I kind of alluded to it, I just wrote a post saying like, what is literacy today? And I didn't define it. I actually said it's more important that you actually have a conversation saying, what are the skills, right? Thinking about, COVID the last year, people having to fast pace some of their technology skills because they didn't see it as relevant. And now it was like the only way we could connect with some of our students in schools. So I'm going to save it, because I got to ask you a sports question, because I just have to, but before I get into that, because I know a lot of people, when I start talking about that, they're like, I'm out. They don't care anymore. They're like, I just here for the education stuff. So where can people find you, and where can they find, the programs and the offerings that you have in this area?
So I love for them to check out www.videojournalismpro.com. www.videojournalismpro.com. Right there, they'll have a free guide, or they'll be able to download a free guide. It's called 10 Ways Students Can Create Better Video Content and Create a Better Life. Just because of the reasons that I just emphasized in terms of how this helps them in so many different aspects of their life. It's just a free resource that just talks about, using your computer as a teleprompter. qprompter.com, because when it comes to video creation, some students might not be confident in terms of reading and speaking on camera, and you actually can turn your, laptop into a teleprompter, and that way they can read and be a little bit more comfortable on camera. So it has just different resources, free resources that they can use to start to implement things. And then certainly, there are other offerings if they want the full program, because I understand some teachers aren't, technologically savvy, and, it could be a learning curve, and this could be too much for them. So certainly there are offerings in that regard, but they can connect with me on Facebook as well. C Townsend TV on Facebook. I love to chat with them, love to speak with them, to just see how they can get started. They don't have to have a huge budget. They don't have to, and you talked about this. it's not necessarily about having a media arts program
Yep.
and a full-fledged television studio. It's about integrating this
Yep.
into the classroom, into the English classroom, even if it's into the history classroom. I
Yep.
have to add this because you mentioned your daughter and you do unboxing videos.
Yep.
And I heard some other educators talk about this, and this was so amazing. I don't remember who I heard it from, but this didn't come from me. But what if you're doing history unboxing videos?
That'd be awesome.
So, you know, what would you send Ernest Hemingway, or what would you send Neil Armstrong? Or if you could send something to yourself from 5 years back, you know, yourself 5 years ago or 10 years into the future, what would you send to yourself, and then have them create a video like that? I mean, when I heard that, that was like, wow, that was just
awesome.
Super innovative, you know, super out of the box, so to speak. So there's so many things that you can do with video that can integrate into the classroom. And it's not just an add-on, it's an extra. Just like math, just like science, I believe it should be mandatory and essential for the day and age in which we live.
Okay, so if you are listening right now, and if you're on YouTube or you're listening on a podcast, you can actually see a link to your Facebook. You're going to see a link to your program. So if you missed that, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll have seen it popped up on the screen when it was up there too. So just check the description, and you'll have access to all the stuff that we're talking about. And I think as you're talking about this, we connected this is a whole premise of the notion of innovate inside the box, is that this should not be a separate, it can be, right? You know, for students who want to go deeper into this and want to pursue this maybe as a career, or, you know, have a really big interest in it. But I think it is, you know, like I'm teaching a class with UPenn right now, and I'm actually saying, like, you don't have to write every answer to your assignment. You can do video, you can do podcasts, you can do different things, because I want them to see the value of this for their own learning as adults. And then I want them going, this would be really cool if my students do this, right? And I think that, to me, and like a lot of them, you know, we would have like, hey, you have like a 1,500 word, you know, or 2,000 word thing that you have to meet. And I would just say, like, I'm not going to tell you how long it should be. I'm not going to tell you how long you should write. You have to show me you understand your learning. If it takes 30 seconds, cool. If it takes 10 minutes, that's what you need to do, whatever. So you have to like figure out, how do you actually communicate effectively that you understand what we're learning in this class. And so trying to put people in that situation as adults, I think is really powerful. So as I said, for anyone who's listening, just check the description. You'll actually see the links to everything they're talking about. I'm going to ask you this last question, because you, like, both of us want to be an MBA. Then I wanted to go into sports journalism, and you took that job too. So like, there's like, why didn't I do that? I didn't know that was an opportunity, and probably, you know, in Canada, they would have made me do hockey, which, you know, I would have been excited about. So out of every like thing that you covered for sports, what was your coolest sports moment? Like, if you could like pick one, you know, what was the coolest sports moment that you have?
So this would be specific, I guess, to fan bases in America, and really specific to, you know, people that follow college football. So certainly in college football, college sports, there's a lot of rivalries in terms of Ohio State and Michigan. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
we only watch U.S. sports in Canada. That's all we watch.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, no, I could tell you the NCAA. I could tell you the NCAA tournament. I couldn't name one team in the college basketball for Canada, for university. I couldn't name one. Yeah.
But are you familiar with Alabama versus Auburn?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the Iron Bowl.
I knew you were going to say this. I knew you were going to say this, and you're going to drive me crazy. Yes, because I'm like so jealous right now.
Yeah. So it's the kick six game. It's the kick six game. And I was at the kick six game. You know, just like we talked before, you were at the Kawhi Leonard bouncing the ball game, iconic moment. I was at the kick six game when Alabama certainly missed the field goal, and a gentleman ran it all the way back, and Alabama Auburn fans would kill me because I can hear it. He could go all the way. They're going to be celebrating all night. I mean, I was on the field, because, you know, once the college football game is over, you prepare to go on the field to do interviews. So I was right there, ready to interview the Alabama players. He ran it all the way back. and they won that game. The Auburn fans, at Jordan Hare stormed the field. Yeah, that's easy.
And Auburn
somebody asked me.
And Auburn won the national championship that year too, right? After that,
well, they went to the national championship. But they actually lost to Jameis Winston. If people now we're getting really deep in the woods, Jameis Winston in Florida State.
Yeah.
But that actually was at the Rose Bowl in California. So my TV station flew me out to the Rose Bowl. So one of the most iconic stadiums, in college football.
That's amazing.
The granddaddy of them all, Auburn versus Florida State, Jameis Winston, the Heisman Trophy winner. I was at that game and Auburn had a big lead and ended up losing that game and Florida State won a national championship. So, I mean, that was both of those combined together. I mean, that just takes the cake. And to be honest, and I tell students this, students that do want to be in media, to have that job, George, and it was a job like that was work. I actually got paid to do that.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's just outstanding. I mean, I couldn't be more grateful, more blessed, more appreciative that I was able to do that for 17 years because you and I love sports. So to day in and day out to go to work and they pay you to watch games.
And tell stories, right? And tell stories.
And tell stories.
It's amazing.
And tell stories. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I didn't just go to games. Part of being in the media is what are the stories? Because I work for a news organization. So the people that didn't care about sports, you always had to tell a story that would kind of be of human interest that would relate to people, not just who won or who lost, but what are some of their triumphs? What are some of the obstacles that they had to overcome? So that's where my passion for storytelling comes in, because it's not a game every day, so the days when it's not a game, what can you tell me about this coach or this quarterback or this point guard or this running back? What can you tell me about their life that makes me want to root for them even more? It's the stories. Absolutely.
You mentioned Alabama, Auburn earlier in the podcast. And as soon as
Chris
you mentioned
Davis, and I have to say Chris Davis, because if anybody's a college football fan, they would be like, you don't know who that was. So it was Chris Davis who ran it back. I have to, now that it came back to my mind.
As soon as you said that, I was like, he was at that game, wasn't he? He was at that game. Because I actually remember watching that. And that was just like a crazy ending and, such a storied rivalry and just so cool. And I honestly loved talking with you. Anyone that's listening, if you're not jacked up about this stuff, like it's just so interesting, make sure that you connect. And it's Clement. I'm in practice.
Clement, absolutely.
Clement,
you got it.
Right. Make sure you connect with him after, because I think there's so much that applies to education. There's so much applies not only to education, but our lives in general and how we have access to things that we did not have access to for our kids. Because the biggest thing for me, and I think, you mentioned your parents, both educators, my parents, both immigrants to Canada, the reason they did what they did was to ensure that we had access to opportunities that they didn't. And I think both of us are trying to take advantage of that and make sure that our kids have access to things that we didn't when we grew up as well. So it was amazing talking to you. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I look forward to more, and I hope a lot of people connect with you and your program. So thanks everyone for listening, and thank you so much for being on here today.